Hi, I'm Megan Gilger, and welcome to the Fresh Exchange podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about seed starting. And in fact, this whole month, we are going to be talking about seed starting. It is one of those things that I have said before is not necessary to be a home gardener. And I 100% stand behind that. You do not have to do that. In fact, there was a really awesome comment in one of our garden planning workshops in the online community about how maybe if you have a smaller garden, it doesn't make sense to do it. And they were pricing it out and talking about it, even though they had had a lot of success in the past. So I don't always suggest seed starting. And like I said, you do not have to do it in order to be a gardener. It is a fun thing. It is something that's interesting. It offers a lot of opportunity to diversify what you're growing in your garden. And if you have an extremely large garden, it can be really, really, really helpful in terms of cost. But for most of us, it doesn't make sense because our gardens aren't that big and we don't need that much. So only consider this if you are looking to offer more diversity in your garden. You can't find the exact plants you want and you want to start them yourself, things like that. So I just want to say that. On top of that, I also want to note that this Friday, there is a free workshop that is available to you. The link is in the show notes. It's from 12 to 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is on Zoom, and it is offered for free. If you cannot attend in person or live, no worries. There's a replay. It will come to you in an email right afterwards. So if you're at all interested in that, you can go ahead and sign up through the link underneath down there below if you are interested. Now, we also have recently launched our Seed Starting 101 course in the online community. It is about 4 hours and you can read through it. There aren't a lot of videos, but it is a read through that covers everything you possibly want to know about seed starting. It is included in our memberships, as well as all the other courses, including the beginner garden course, as well as all the replays from our garden planning intensive. Still plenty of time to catch up on almost 3 months worth of content. And you get it all for $84 for 3 months, plus an all access pass as a community. Everything, all the downloads, all the past lessons, everything. Okay. It's a screaming deal when you really think about what you're getting, plus all these amazing people you get to connect with. So you can go in, you can see all the other designs people are doing, how they're utilizing things. It's incredibly helpful. It's really fun. And I think it will be really great. On top of that, if you are one of those people that is out and about and you're like, gosh, Megan, I just don't have time to sit down and take a course. No worries. You now can get it on the iPhone app if you have iOS or an iPhone. And so you can read it wherever you are on the go. You don't have to do it at a computer. So very simple, very easy and accessible. Okay, so let's get going today. We're going to be talking about timing. How do you time your starts? Now, this can feel super complicated. And if you went through the garden planning course as a member, or you listen to some of the podcasts and got some tidbits, awesome, because that's going to be really helpful today. But basically what we're going to be talking about is how do we understand when to start organizing and planning out our seeds. It's really important to do this ahead of time. It's going to surprise you how long some of these seeds need in order to germinate, in order to actually come into full maturity that they're ready to go outside. And so it's really important to start this process now. So first of all, you're going to need a couple things. You need to know your growing zone, and you're going to need to know your last frost date. Knowing your growing zone will give you your last frost date. Pretty simple. Last frost date, as I've said many, many, many times, is not it's not something to live or die by. It is an average that is over 10 years of time. So I would say give it plus or minus 2 weeks because it could shift. It's not exactly that date. So do not hold it as just complete truth because it is not. You'll have to watch the weather as you get closer to know when to actually put your plants out. But The main thing that you have to know is that last frost date, because it gives you a general idea of how to work back from there. So for learning purposes today, I am just going to talk about tomatoes. So tomatoes need about 6 to 8 weeks in order to grow, for them to be ready to go outside. Now, if you live in a really warm climate, you can actually direct seed them and you're fine. Like we're talking like Hawaii. But if you live somewhere like me in zone 5, zone 6, you definitely need to start this inside. You also need to understand that they can't even really go out until June. So, and we don't necessarily want huge plants going out. In fact, smaller plants like 4 to 6 inches is really ideal because they are going to be more vigorous at putting themselves into the ground when they're ready. And they're going to be oddly more resilient because they're not going to potentially be root bound. They're not going to have had too much coddling inside of our indoor seed starting setups. There's all these things that are going to be really helpful if they're a little bit smaller. So we don't want to start them too early, as much as you want to smell the scent of tomatoes. You just don't want to start them too soon. That said, what we want to do is we say, I'm just going to use my zone for instance. May 15th is technically the last frost date. So the soonest I need to now go back 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to lean towards 7 just to cut the average. And that's usually somewhere about Good Friday. Not that it's a religious thing, but it's just a marker on the calendar. It's usually that weekend. And that's usually when I know, okay, this is seed starting time, because everything after that is usually less than 8 weeks. The only things that are not are things like eucalyptus, certain flowers. Peppers need like 10 to 12 weeks. Onions and most alliums need 10 to 12, sometimes 14 weeks. They need a very long time. I don't start any of those myself. So I just go and buy them because I don't want to be seed starting that long because I don't need to. So I do some tomatoes and I do a lot of flowers because I like the different diversity of things, but that's about it. And so so knowing that I need to start them like that Good Friday, I'll make sure everything's set up. And from there, every single other plant will start taking their spot. And I have a great seed starting organizer in the online community. And basically what it does is it helps you put in all the key information, like the depth of the seed, how many seeds you actually did. Because my tip is always to do double what you think you need. And then it also goes through dates and timings. When is the general idea? When did I actually seed it? And when did it go outside? One of the things to consider is that the last 2 weeks of every single plant that you have that needs to go outside, they need to be hardened off. And I go through this in the course that's in the community, but very, very in-depthly, like actually give like a system to utilize and a set of routines so that you know exactly how to harden off your seedlings. But basically you need to think about it like you're helping your plants adjust to the outside world. So if we were to go from Florida to northern Michigan in one flight and just like throw ourselves into the snow with a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and it be cloudy and storming, and we just came from Florida, that is not going to be very comfortable. We are not going to be adjusted. We are not going to feel ready for that. So we're doing the same thing with the plants. We're saying, okay, cool, you're ready to go out, but you're not actually ready to go out. You're big enough. You have all your leaves. You're showing signs that you're strong and healthy, but we need to prep you to go outside. And we'll talk more about that process too. But for the most part, you just need to factor that in, that like you got to put that into your schedule, that like you're going to be and really the ones that you have to worry about are your hot weather plants, like your peppers, your eggplants, your tomatoes, your melons. Lettuces usually, if it's not too hot, they're usually fine. The cold doesn't bother them. So also think about the temperature in which your house is. If you're starting these seeds in, a 65 to 70 degree home, that's what they're comfortable with. So if it's somewhere between 55 and 65 outside, they're probably going to be perfectly fine. It's really these ones that have been in such a cooler space or a very temperature controlled space, and then they go outside and it's windy. The sun is intense. They've never been in direct sunlight. Even through a window, they have not been in direct sunlight. So there's all sorts of tips in order to do this. And so making sure that you place that as a priority in your schedule is really important. So my last tip for you with timing and things like that, as you can kind of tell, this can be really overwhelming. This is one of the reasons I don't suggest beginners doing this. Unless you just have a really good optimism with it and you're like, I just want to try this. I think it'd be really cool. And if I fail, I fail. And if I succeed, cool. I just learned something. But if you don't do it, it's also okay. So all that to say, because of how confusing it is, I also suggest if it's your first time seed starting, don't do any more than 10 to 12 varieties of plants, because it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to take on. So do yourself a favor and keep it limited this year, and then move it up a little bit more every year as you gain your skills and continue to grow as a gardener. So I just don't want you guys to be overwhelmed. And I always just want you to feel confident and at peace as a gardener and feeling a lot of success while also learning a lot. So hopefully that gives you that confidence to do so this year. Okay, my friends, the rest of this month, we're going to be talking everything seed starting. So be prepared. If you have questions, you can always DM me on Instagram. Until then, I'll see you guys out there.